folks, Chris here on the live stream. Straight Voltage once again. Welcome aboard those who are able to make it and join us here for Ndaba, Africa, the Straight Voltage live stream. This is the post-concert wind down after Giselle's concert earlier, live from Pretoria. So hopefully folks will be joining us here shortly as we get started talking about events taking place around the world, here in the United States, in Africa, and we'll just really get it rolling from there. So anyway, how are folks doing today? Just let me know. Feel free to drop me a note there in the stream, and we'll be happy to discuss any topic that comes to mind. Right, so for those who missed it earlier today, we had at 7 p.m. South Africa time, 1 in the afternoon here in the U.S., about 2.5 hours ago, we had Giselle, a Namibian musician who lives in Pretoria, who has decided to do her debut for this album online. And so we were able to get her on live streaming on this channel. Really fantastic event. If you have a chance after we're done here with the live stream, feel free at any time to go back and take a look at that concert. It's now available. Look under my most recent live streams. Once the video is finished processing whatever the guys behind the curtain do there in South Africa, not South Africa, at YouTube, I will promote that video as the main video you see on my page. But for now, you'll find under the live streams. Anyways, an hour-long concert. It was fantastic. Really enjoyed it myself. I think a lot of people enjoyed it. So anyway, please feel free to take a look at that. It was a really exciting event. Kind of nice with technology, the things we can do now. It's really cool. So anyway, I hope that folks enjoyed it. And if you haven't seen it, feel free to tune in and catch Giselle. No longer live, but now a video posted here from the stream that she did with me earlier. I see some folks are tuning in now, so welcome aboard, everyone. Sawubona. Well, actually, I can't see you, but because I'm just here and I can't see you, but I do see people coming on board the stream. So thank you so much for joining my stream tonight. This is Stray Voltage, random thoughts, anything that comes to mind, any topic is on the table. If you've got a question or a comment, just put it in the comment section there, the chat, and we'll just run from there. But as I was just saying, for those folks tuning in, we had 2.5 hours ago now a live stream debut, concert album debut from Giselle, a Namibian singer who lives in Pretoria right now, and she recorded the song Sudwes a few years ago in late 2016, which was a moderate success, but a beautiful song. And now she's launching a new album. She's a country sort of pop singer, so interesting her song. For those who tuned into the live stream, it was actually fascinating. I think some people just tuned in because it was my channel. They saw it, they wanted to come in. They didn't catch the promo, or they didn't realize the things I've been saying about Giselle. So I had people come in and say, hey, is she Namibian? I said, absolutely. I mentioned that she's Namibian. But the reason that folks said that was because of her accent. Her accent is very distinct. It's not the sort of Afrikaans accent that you hear in Mpumalanga or Northwest, Pretoria, Joburg, or even in Cape Town. So a lot of people noticed the accent was a little bit different. And someone said, no, she can't be from Namibia. She's from the Northern Cape. In fact, she's from Grootfontein in Namibia, northern part of Namibia. And she does have that accent from up there. And also she lived in the Northern Cape for a while near Uppington. Hey, Editube, welcome. Neil Potguider. Hey, guys. Thanks for jumping in the stream. Glad to see you here. Yeah, so she does have that Northern Cape and Namibian Afrikaans accent. So it's people caught on to that. Her manager, Johan Eisel, was intrigued when I mentioned that. He said that the last thing he expected to hear back about this concert was that people would be remarking about Giselle's accent. And I said, well, people catch on to those things. You know, people's ears are attuned to things like accents. So it was pretty cool. So more folks who just joined, welcome aboard, everybody. Yeah, so anyway, hey, Michelle Jardine. Hey, you were there for Giselle's concert. Oh, my God. Was that not an amazing concert? Yes, I know I'm biased because I was promoting her video, but her stream, but oh my gosh, it was such a good concert. I really, especially the last 35, 40 minutes were just so spot on. It was difficult for me to listen and chat, but I was doing that to keep the chat going. But it was really amazing. I really enjoyed the concert. But yeah, so people pick up on accents. It's funny like that. And even in a language that doesn't have all that many native speakers of it, such as Afrikaans, which between coloreds and white South Africans and Indians and blacks, it's much smaller numbers, whose first language is Afrikaans, those in Namibia and Botswana, and those in the diaspora around the world, we're talking a little over 10, maybe 12 million people whose first language is Afrikaans, yet the accents are distinct. That's the funny thing about language. It's truly interesting stuff. Yeah, Blues Pixie, hey, just south of Uppington. Yeah, very hot up there. Yeah, the Northern Cape is beautiful to visit. Beautiful to visit. That would be probably the one thing I'd say about it. Namibia is beautiful to visit too. Some fantastic natural wonders, scenery, amazing place. And surprisingly, for such a small town, Windhoek is what 100,000 or so people, maybe a little bit more than that these days. But for such a small national capital, Windhoek is surprisingly cosmopolitan. I remember the first time I was there, I remarked I was sitting in a cafe and I heard Portuguese, Afrikaans, German, English, um, Bush languages, something that the San speak, which I didn't recognize, but I could tell because of the clicks that were in the language when they passed through the cafe. And I also heard what I thought was Herero and a few other languages, which I wasn't even able to identify. It was fascinating, very diverse mix of people in Windhoek for such a small, dare I say, provincial capital, but it's definitely a national capital. So, yeah, for those of you who are over on Ronaldo's stream, thanks for sliding over and joining me. I gave you a few minutes to hit the loo, to tank up, get something to drink, and so I'll do that myself right now with my Starbucks. We don't have Scary Stumpers here in the U.S., and if we did, I don't think I'd drink it anyway. It seems to me like it's a poor excuse for chocolate milk. Don't tell Ronaldo. Anyway. Neil, so your wife watched it and really enjoyed it. Great. Well, listen, here's the nice thing about the internet. It's available. So when you have time after this stream, Neil, feel free to tune in and watch Giselle's concert. I was really holding my breath. It went well. It did go well. It looks like there weren't any hiccups. I was just watching now. I have Roku. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Roku here in the US. It's a streaming device which brings in multiple things. You can put Amazon on there, you can put Hulu, you can put all these different channels on it, and it does a really good job. And I have the Ultra 4G connection that brings these in. So I use Roku normally on my large screen television, which sits in the living room. So it's about 65 inches, one of those curved screens like this. So what happens is, can you guys hear me? Okay, great. I just switched microphones. Gosh, I didn't realize this microphone wasn't on. So that was the PC microphone, and now I've just turned it over to my Blue microphone. Yes, this one right here. Lovely 10th anniversary for Blue. There you go. It's still working as I move it around. Yeah. Anyway, so this has better sound quality. So my apologies if this sounds a little bit better and it wasn't great to begin with. I was so excited to get to the stream, I guess, that I didn't turn on. But yeah, I really like this microphone. I don't have a pop filter. That's because I speak it obliquely, so it's to the side. So hopefully it's working. Michelle says, "Are we going to be entertained with another concert?" Wow, Michelle, that's a good question. I will see what I can do if and when she's going to do another one. That was just amazing. I can't promise they'll always be free because I don't control the artist. But yeah, they really wanted to do this one free. They also stream to Facebook, but I just don't go to Facebook. Come to my channel. Yeah, so we'll see if we can get them on again. Okay, the audio is all great. Thanks, Neil. I appreciate that. Excellent. Yeah, I like this one. It makes me feel like I'm back on radio. For those who don't know, I once was a disc jockey on a radio station. Used to work at WMPO Radio. It was Middleport Pomeroy. So WMPO, Middleport Pomeroy, Ohio, the best sound in the country. Given that I don't really care for country music, it was kind of ironic that I worked at a country music station. But I did. Back when I was at university, I did that for a while. And before that, I was a disc jockey on campus. As a freshman at university, I was on the radio. And we used to transmit the radio not over the AM frequency or FM, but over carrier wave. So you would get the radio signal by plugging into the wall outlet. So it was run through the electrical system, which is kind of weird. And yeah, it is. And that's actually how people do it, the carrier current. And you would get the hum or the buzz over the sound. But nonetheless, it was a way to do radio streaming, and it didn't interfere with we didn't have to have an FCC license to transmit over the airwaves. So it was pretty cool. Got a lot of experience, learned how to use the turntables, to use the promo machines, to cut and make recordings, to do public service announcements. Also learned and got my license as a radio operator for being a disc jockey. Yes, you have one from the Federal Communications Commission. So I got it and learned a lot about broadcasting back then, did the news, and then that's played a kind of a role in my life. I've not really been on the radio, but now that I'm on YouTube doing this, it's kind of cool. And a lot of it's very similar in some respects. So what else we got here? Neil says audios are good. Sean said, "Hey Sean, welcome. I remember those little Starbucks glass bottle 4-packs. I normally dilute my chocolate chinos with milk." Well, here's the thing, Sean. I don't buy the 4 packs because these guys fleece you for money. So I'm kind of cheap, or I guess the word is frugal, and I get mine from the wholesale stores, whether it's Costco or Sam's Club or BJ's, but only when they're on sale. They frequently go on sale, and then you save about 25% of the price, again, being frugal. But I get them in the 15 pack. They were 12 pack for a long time, but now they come 15 pack. So for 15 pack, they want to charge you 18 US dollars. Yeah, it's over $1 a bottle, but they'll typically go on sale for about $4 or $5 off, and so then you're paying less than $1 per bottle. Still expensive, but a lot cheaper than hopping in your vehicle, burning some petrol to ride to the local station and collect one there. Anyway, so hey, let me ask you all this question: does anybody know where South African breweries (SAB) will be dumping the beer? Because we need to let people know 400 million bottles of beer are going to be dumped if the government does not allow them to move them to different warehouses. They have 400 million. This isn't stale beer. This is just beer they've been producing to keep the assembly lines working. And now they can't transport it to put it in storage elsewhere. So the government is going to force them to drop 400 million bottles of beer. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely fantastic story there. It's mind-boggling. I can't even picture 400 million bottles of beer. As I said in the earlier stream, for those who are here with us, can you imagine? Can you imagine singing that old song used to where kids, 400 million bottles of beer on the wall, 400 million bottles of beer, take one down and pass it around, 399,999,999 bottles of beer on the wall. It's just insane. Where would you put it? That's a lot of glass. 400 million bottles of beer. This isn't 400 million bottles of beer sitting in a vat. These are bottled. That's just insane. What a waste of resources. Yeah, Sean says, I'm living on the air in Cincinnati WKRP. Yeah, that's a classic show. Yeah, Gary Sandy and all those guys, Lonnie Anderson, Les Nessman. Yeah, WKRP in Cincinnati. That was a great show. Really, really loved it. Really loved it. Let's see. Pool is available. It is. What a waste of beer. Oh, Michelle, the pool is for the beer. Okay, I love it. That's great stuff. So let me read a little bit from that news story. This is circulating around South Africa. It says that, of course, all alcohol sales ceased on March 27th as a consequence of the nationwide lockdown. The beer has been piling up at production facilities. And so the South African Breweries has approached the government of South Africa for special permission to move the beer to storage facilities. But if they can't do that, 130 million liters, 34 million gallons will be discarded at a loss of just $8 million. Now, that's the part that got my attention. 400 million bottles of beer only cost them $8 million. Clearly, that's just production cost. That's not the retail price because they would have got a lot more money. Here in the U.S., you get at least a couple bucks a bottle in a bar. So 400 million bottles of beer would be $500 million here in the U.S. when you sell it in retail, at least $500 million in a bar. Think about that. That's insane. It's insane. Saying that it would put 2,000 jobs at risk. That's what SAB has said. Yeah, a reminder for those of you outside South Africa, South Africa is one of the few countries around the world that has banned the sale of alcohol and cigarettes for the course of the lockdown. Other countries have banned alcohol, but not that many. And almost no other countries have banned the use of cigarettes. Botswana being an exception. For some strange reason, they've also banned cigarette sales. But South Africa has banned the sale and transport, not just the sale, but the transport of alcohol. And their argument is that, so let me read this to you. Professor Salim Karim, one of the government's top health advisors in the COVID-19 pandemic, has defended the alcohol ban at a briefing with reporters 2 days ago, Wednesday. He said alcohol is a significant contributing factor to violent crime and road accidents in South Africa, and banning its sale has reduced pressure on medical services. Well, I question that statement. It's true, but really it's a wash, isn't it? What about all the domestic violence as a result of people who are addicted to alcohol, who are not getting their booze, not getting their drink, and they're beating up on their spouses and partners and children and such, kicking their dogs? What about the despair, the loneliness people are having? Now, I'm not saying alcohol should be a crutch for people's ills, but the reality, folks, is that it really is an issue. And people who are addicted to alcohol, or people who just drink it socially, they miss their alcohol, especially those who are addicted to it. And that's a problem. It's a real problem. As far as, violent crimes and road accidents, that the jury's out on that. How many murders, rapes, and home invasions are going on now? It's still occurring. And we've heard disparate information from different government sources about whether it's reduced or up or down. I would hold out question on the statistics on that. That this stuff is going to happen regardless of what's going on. Now, the road accidents. How is drink driving affecting road accidents when hardly anybody's allowed to leave their homes? It shouldn't matter. So road accidents, this is the lame story by this gentleman, Mr. Kareem, trying to tell people that the reason that we can't sell alcohol during the lockdown when people can't leave their homes is to reduce road accidents. Really? Almost nobody's on the road. Seriously? Anyway, that's the sort of that kind of logic really makes you scratch your head. Do they really think that we're all idiots, that we're morons? Well, here in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, we received more discouraging news that the lockdown, which affects two-thirds of the state at this point, one-third of the state has been lifted from the lockdown. Those are the smaller counties in the north central part of the state and the northwestern part of the state, which are mostly wilderness, heavily forested, mining areas in some cases, oil in some cases. Not a lot of population, and they've had very few cases of COVID-19. Those counties, as of today, I think it is, the lockdown is lifted for them. But for the rest of Pennsylvania, I think it's 88 counties or something like that we have here. For the rest of Pennsylvania, we remain under lockdown. And in fact, Governor Wolf has doubled down here in central Pennsylvania. Not only are we still on lockdown here in York County, Pennsylvania, it's been extended to the 28th of May already. And now I understand we will be going into June. This beggars the imagination. In a county of 450,000 people, we have under 700 cases of COVID-19 after 2+ months of lockdown. And we have barely a dozen fatalities at this point. And yet we're going to remain in lockdown into June when countries in Africa are coming off lockdown and much of the United States is coming off lockdown. We will see what happens, but it does beg the imagination what's truly happening here. So Neela says, what's today's rugby jersey? Well, this is a USA rugby jersey. There you go. Fly Emirates. This is not a World Cup jersey because World Cup you can't put advertising, but this is a regular seasonal jersey. This one's from a few years ago from the U.S. Not my favorite, but just a different one. I do like the red stripes down this part of the jersey. It's kind of cool. And by the way, you can put these things on backwards. In my rush to get back on air, I grabbed it and I just threw it on. I was like, okay, wait a second, something's not right here. I had the jersey on backwards. I didn't even look, so a little bit embarrassing, but at least it wasn't embarrassing on air. Yeah, so this is a USA rugby jersey from the USA national team, the Eagles. There it is, right there, the Eagles. And it's not the best quality. I mean, this is print. That's not even stitched on. So, I prefer the really good ones. But I have lots of rugby jerseys. Those of you who follow me devoutly know that I try to put on a different rugby jersey or rugby shirt each time. And usually I'll have a different scarf up. But I am running low on scarves. I've done about 60 videos. So I don't have an infinite supply of scarves. So I'll start recycling scarves, or I'll start putting scarves up from other things like hockey and even football, soccer. Anyway. But this one here, this is from the Emirates series, hence the jersey, the Emirates, because they sponsored this summer series. This was a couple years ago in June 10th of 2017, June 10th, 2017 in Harrison, New Jersey, which is right next to Newark. And that was the U.S. versus Ireland. And they creamed us. They absolutely destroyed the U.S. Really disappointing. But that's when John Mitchell was still the coach before Gary Gould took over. And it was an interesting time. Anyway, but it was nice to see the Irish Rugby Football Union send its national team here to play the U.S., even if it was in New Jersey. But it was a good deal. Really enjoyed that. So let's see what else we got here. Folks are talking about beer. Good. Beer, my kingdom for beer. Yeah. Well, we can still buy beer here in Pennsylvania, but the state has control of alcohol, hard liquor. So in Pennsylvania, those are run by state-owned entities. Yeah, we got parastatals here too. So the state stores, as they call them, are run by the state, and as soon as the lockdown took effect, they shut them all down, ostensibly to prevent the ills of alcohol from causing problems during lockdown. But again, the empathy for people who have alcohol addiction, and that's not a small number of people, really left me puzzled. But you can still get alcohol here. You can purchase beer, and I believe you can still purchase wine in some locations. I might be wrong about that, but you can certainly purchase beer here in Pennsylvania still. So anyway, going along with the rugby theme, I've got more rugby stuff here today. So I think I showed this on a previous stream. This is a rugby ball from the Women's Rugby World Cup, or as World Rugby has decided to call it, the World Cup now. No longer making the distinction between men's and women's. They're just calling the Rugby World Cup the Rugby World Cup. So every 2 years, you'll have a Rugby World Cup. Which one's next, the men or the women? I don't know, because it's not in the title. But this is from 2017. This is from when the World Cup was held in Ireland, with matches in Belfast and in Dublin. And the finals were played in Belfast, and I was at that. So I do collect these rugby balls. I really love the Celtic pattern that they put on this one, and the shirts and everything. Really nice. Was interesting. So the USA, the women did very well there. They came in fourth after New Zealand, England, France, and the USA, if I remember correctly. It was a pretty good World Cup for the USA women. Alev Kelter, Nia Tapper, and some other really talented players on the team. And Chris Thomas. It was quite exciting to see them play. Anyway, so that's another one. And then someone like this from my stream earlier. Also have a collection of these. And this is a World Cup hat. This one is from 2015. I like these. I try to get them every time for the World Cup. What they do is they put each of the national teams, the 20 teams that qualify. And so you see here, for this one, for some strange reason, the USA is in white. I don't know why. I mean, the logo is not white. It includes blue, white, red, white, blue. But here it's in all white. Yet the Springboks are in the correct colors. Even Japan, the Brave Blossoms, are in their pink and green. So I'm not so sure why that happened on there. But anyway, suppose it wasn't unique. Ireland doesn't have any green. It's white. So maybe it was just to distinguish them on the hat. But all 20 rugby unions appear on the cap, and they make these for each of the World Cups. So anyway, but they're hard to come by. Once the World Cup's over, they usually sell out, and then you can't find them unless you're very lucky. So Paulie says, can you please talk about the Army War College, its role in officer development, skills taught, reason for the college, perhaps? Sure. Yeah, Michelle, yeah, it is a nice memento. Yeah, I got lots of those little things. I really like those. I collect pins too. So, yeah. So the U.S. Army War College, let's see if I lose viewers here and tune people out. If this bores people, let me know before you disappear because we can talk about other things. But U.S. Army War College is the senior most level of professional military education, or PME as we call it in the U.S. military. Other militaries call it the same thing. So the War College, there are several of them actually, the Army War College, the Naval War College, the Air War College, and the National Defense University. So I lost somebody already. So those are the senior service colleges. Nice cap, better looking than the set cap. Well, thanks, Edu, too. By the way, I'll be making my own hats and jerseys, and they're not tied to my YouTube channel, but I'll be making them available on my YouTube channel at some point as the lockdown progresses. I have my own logo that I designed for my consultancy, and they're really for that. So it's Indaba Africa, moving across Africa together, something like that's my logo. So I'll be making those available at some point. And I don't know if I ever do a membership thing. Maybe I'll do what Ronaldo does with caps. I'm not sure, but that'll be coming somewhere down the road, and it's not tied to the channel, but I will make it available on the channel. But back to the War College. So these are called senior service colleges. And the idea is that senior officers, usually lieutenant colonels, about to pin on full colonels, and in the case of international students who come, we call international fellows, sometimes general officers, 1-stars, on a rare occasion, 2-star general. So that also includes civilians from the different agencies in the U.S. and even some foreign international students. So I had a Ministry of Defense official from Estonia who was part of my War College class when I was a student. So he was in it with us as a civilian. But what this is the highest level of professional military education that you can attain, and it's necessary. You can't become a general officer unless you are a War College, or as we call it, senior service college graduate. So in the Army, you can go to any of them. And you can also go to a postgraduate program for a master's degree at a civilian university, but that's a very small number of officers. And I say small, a couple of dozen per year out of the hundreds that actually go to school each year. So what happens is that you also have some that go to foreign schools, like in France or in the UK or in Canada, Australia, places like that. So that's another possibility. So we send our own military officers to foreign schools. So for instance, I went to the Staff College in Tunisia. L'École d'État-Major. That's the Tunisian Staff College in Maddow, which is in Tunis. And I attended that for about 9 or 10 months, and I'm a graduate of L'École d'État-Major. And so we do that. Now, that one for me didn't count as credit for that level of military education. I had to do the Staff College in the U.S. too, but that's because no one had certified. After I graduated, it got certified, and I never would have had to do the U.S. one, but I did both. Anyway, so the senior service colleges, we focus on the strategic level of warfare and national policy. So, for instance, I taught courses as the Director of African Studies on Africa, of course, but a bigger part of my role during the year was teaching national security strategy and policy, theory of warfare and strategy, security sector reform, things like this. So all these strategic level issues we discuss, that we deal with, that soldiers and senior leaders deal with. So the objective is to train a colonel to be fully qualified They should already be qualified at the tactical, and then at the operational level, we deal with the operational level somewhat, but it's mostly strategic. And their job is to go off and be a senior leader or to be an advisor to a senior leader who's making decisions. And as a foreign area officer, that's kind of what I did for a good portion of the second half of my career, even in a much lower rank status. So as a major, I was doing what we were training colonels to do, full colonels. And then as lieutenant colonel, I was doing what we were training full colonels to do. And then as a colonel, I was doing what I'd been trained to do previously. I'd already done the work. And so, but most officers in the, well, my time now is 1603, that's correct, 82. So most folks don't have the sort of experience that I had in the military because I was in a unique career field. It did something unusual, which very few people are involved in. And that was by choice. I had to compete very hard to do that. But beyond that, I'd previously been an intelligence officer. And because of being an intelligence officer, I did unusual work in which oftentimes I would do assignments where I wore civilian clothes, and most officers and soldiers don't have assignments like that. You're wearing a uniform all the time. So I had been accustomed to working with senior leaders. I'd advised presidents, ambassadors, envoys, kings, even, so chancellors and general officers, of course, across the board, and senior members of the U.S. and foreign governments. So I had done that for much of my career. But that's what we teach so that folks are ready for it. But I have a philosophical issue with the way that that's done in the U.S. military. To me, if you wait until someone's a full colonel or about to become a full colonel, so the average person is at least 40, 42, even 44, 45 years of age by that time. Teaching an old dog new tricks isn't always easy. People get set in their ways. Their worldview gets set. And more importantly, you can't spend 20 years in uniform focusing on taking that hill, moving that company, moving that battalion, moving that brigade, getting logistics, focused on that, and then suddenly be thrown into the wolves or thrown to the wolves, and you're expected to address this peace conference or participate in a multinational peacekeeping operation and function with a combined force of other countries. Or you're sent to broker something, or you have to deal with Congress. You have to go testify before Congress, or you have to assist, or you have to host a congressional delegation. You can't expect people who have not spent their career at least becoming aware of the strategic environment to become subject matter experts on it overnight. It just doesn't work that way. And so what tends to happen, in my view, is that we don't have the optimum outcome. We do have good results. We take a number of officers who've never been introduced and never had the experience at the strategic level. We introduce them to that, and at least when they leave the war college, they're aware of what they don't know and they're aware of what they should know. And some of them, because of their individual talents, are very capable of adjusting and making that work. But not everybody's capable of that. So my argument has always been, when it comes to strategy and strategic level of warfare and national policy, that we should introduce this to our officers when they're captains. So that would be mid-grade. I'm a good chess player. Michelle, I used to play chess. It's been years since I played. I'd probably be terrible now, but I was a chess player when I was very young. I was very good. But people are smart and they outpace you very quickly, and maybe that's why I quit playing chess. But I just don't play it because it doesn't interest me. But it is a great game. So my suggestion to the U.S. Army in particular is that when an officer is a captain and he goes back for his training to be a company grade officer as a captain at their branch, whether it's intelligence, artillery, armor, aviation, whatever it is, when they go back, the part of the course ought to include at least about a week of introduction to strategy and the strategic level of warfare and national policy. Now, by comparison, as an intelligence officer, I learned those things as a lieutenant, because there were national programs in the intelligence area that I needed to be aware of in order to do my job effectively, which the infantry, the artillery, the armor, the logisticians, they don't know about those things because it's not part of what they do. But I have to be able to reach into the system and get resources from there and query it to do things. So I was taught that early on. So for many intelligence officers who are astute and pay attention, you learn from the very beginning that there's something more than just tactical and operational. You have to think at the strategic level too. Now, not everybody does, but many do. So waiting until officers are colonels, I think, is too late. We need to train these folks at a much earlier stage, introduce them. Now, I had a colonel, he was a lieutenant colonel then, now he's a full colonel, and he's about to retire, who was one of my students a few years ago when I first started the war college. And he says, no, Colonel Wyatt, that's just all wrong. No. We should not be teaching captains about strategy. We need to teach them how to move from the motor pool, to do a convoy, to execute an operation, to get logistics so they can move, shoot, move, and communicate on the battlefield. Well, yes, I agree. But you also need to teach those captains about Thucydides and about Sun Tzu and about Kautilya and about national policy strategy, national security strategy, national counterterrorism strategy, international cooperation, things like this, the Bretton Woods system. And he said, no, 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 they don't need that. I said, well, why? He said, because they're not going to be, they're not generals. I said, but let me ask you this question. Do you not think that amongst that cohort of captains, some of them are going to become general officers and a number of them will become colonels? Will they not need to be prepared when they become colonels and already be aware of this and have spent a career inculcating the ideas and the values and learning about it on their own, even if we don't teach it to them after that course, so they're aware of this? And he had a hard time arguing with that. So that's my point. You can't simply walk into something at that stage and poof, yeah, I'm a general. Now I know everything. Yay! Well, maybe somebody can. Alexander the Great certainly could, but there aren't many Alexander the Greats out there. A lot of folks need to spend a lifetime building and developing those skills, the nuances, the interaction, and understanding things. And in order to make a complete general officer, you have to know all those different levels. Blues Pixie says, just watch Go, oldest strategy board game from world's best player from Korea, taken down by an AI player. Ooh, yeah, I remember when was it Deep Blue, the IBM software program, the AI defeated one of the top chess players in the world. That got a lot of attention. That's to be expected, though. I mean, humans make AI, we can make it better and better, and maybe we'll see what happens. But yeah, so that's kind of my view on the Army War College, what it does now. We graduate. Well, not we, I'm not there anymore, but at the Army War College, we have every year, we take in about 385 to 400 students in the resident course. We have a 9-month resident course here at the Carlisle Barracks in central Pennsylvania, in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And then we have a distance education course, distance learning, and that has 400 to 500 students in it, largely drawn from the reserve component, who have regular jobs and only do these things on part-time, weekends, evenings, things like that, or a couple weeks in the summertime. So the distance education program, what typically happens is that they have some attrition and they typically graduate about 360 to 400 max students each year. The resident course normally graduates most of their students. So we graduate anywhere between 700 to 800 War College students each year. Now, at the resident course, the majority aren't even American Army officers. About 180 of those students, sometimes 200, are active duty Army officers. The rest come from the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, from the CIA, from the State Department, from the Department of Treasury, other branches. Plus, we have 75 international students in the resident course. So nearly 1 out of 4 students in the course is an international student. And they break up into seminars. The seminars are usually comprised of 14 to 16 students. Ideally be 12, but we're tight on space in the War College. They're building a new facility eventually here soon. But so we have these seminars, and over 20 seminars each year. And then there are collective events in which we have a large lecture hall in which 400 people show up at once, including the faculty. It's more than 400. And we have lecture series. We have high-level guests. You name a person, we've had them. Prime ministers, presidents, secretaries of this, chancellors of that, ministers of that. People from all across the spectrum, and even from the civilian world who do things unrelated to the military. I'm not a fan of hers, but Rachel Maddow, who's from MSNBC, the broadcaster who's on there, she came to the War College a couple years ago, just before I arrived, and spoke to the War College about strategic issues. So it's quite interesting. We get a lot of lecturers who come and do those things. A lot of events take place, diverse sort of education. The students are given some electives, and they get to choose from electives. I taught several of those electives, including security sector reform. That's one of them. So yeah, it's interesting. You can't just get to it. I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I want to go to the War College. I'm like, okay, first off, I don't decide who goes to War College. The U.S. Army decides who goes to the War College, not me. And that includes international students. And you can't just walk in. You can't. It is a postgraduate institution. When students graduate from the War College, they normally are awarded a Master's of Strategic Studies, which is an accredited postgraduate degree. So you're a master's degree holder. Not every student gets that, but all Americans must do the graduate program. It's required. The international students have the option of not doing it. They can do a project instead. But the majority of international students also do the master's degree. Now, the reason it's there is that sometimes we have students from countries where English is not, lots of students where English is not their first language, but some of these who come on who English is not their first language, it's a difficult challenge for them, particularly writing and researching in English. And so learning the language as you're doing a postgraduate program is not ideal. one of the reasons I didn't go to the University of Mainz when I was a young man, because although I was fluent in German, I wasn't fluent in academic German, and I had not learned the grammar well enough to be successful at university. So I'd gone to the University of Mainz, the Goethe University, and I was going to go to school there, and I decided, nope, I'm going to get out of the Army and go back to college. And that's what I did, even though I spoke German fluently at the time. And it was a wise decision because I would have been an average struggling student in Germany at university, but I came back to the States and I learned a lot more and I excelled because it was in my native language. So anyway, but yeah, so the War College is a fascinating thing, both as a student perspective and also as a faculty member. I truly enjoyed it. It's funny that Paulie asked about that because I received an email from a colleague of mine, who's a retired Air Force colonel, and he sent me a text message a little while ago, and it is the cover of the New York Times from Victory in Europe Day, VE Day. Says the war in Europe is 1945. The war in Europe is ended. Surrender is unconditional. VE will be proclaimed today. Our troops on Okinawa gain. So the war against Japan had continued until we dropped the nuclear bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And then finally the Japanese surrendered. But that was months later. So what he says, this is what he said in the text message. 75 years ago today, Americans won World War II. That's awesome. That's true. Today, Americans can't figure out how to open a barber shop in Pennsylvania. Yeah, well, that's a true statement. It's a consequence of the lockdown. He's absolutely right. That's a colleague of mine named Mike, wonderful guy, really talented instructor, has a great gift for teaching, and I really enjoy his company. I've been a speaker, a guest speaker, in a number of his elective courses when I was teaching at the War College. A lot of fun. So he's one of the people who really stays in touch with me religiously since I stopped teaching there a few months ago. Yeah. So Michelle says, Paulie, hey, thanks for asking that question. Yeah, thanks, Paulie. I appreciate it. This works much better when there's some interaction. You guys ask questions and I can address them and share things rather than me just, pontificating. Although I can do that. Ronaldo can too. Some people really have the ability to do that. But anyway, so Colonel White holds a Master's of Science in International Relations from Troy, Master's. Yep, I have a Master's in International Relations from Troy University. That's correct. And then the Master's Strategic from the U.S. Army War College. And I have all but degree, ABD, from Iowa State University, a degree in International Development Studies. I was unable to defend my thesis before the Army sent me early from teaching at the university to go to Italy to be a commander of a counterintelligence unit back in the late 1990s. So I wasn't able to finish my last term and complete my thesis defense in front of my committee. From overseas, then I tried to coordinate that, and before I could get it to happen, a few years later, my committee chair, unfortunately, at the age of 53, passed away far too soon. He was a wonderful guy, excellent guy, married to a Nigerian or Ghanaian. I think it was Nigerian. Anyway, he passed away, and then my whole committee kind of fell apart, and I was unable to ever defend my thesis. About a decade later, I started to put it all together. I found someone who was willing to do it, and I was trying, but I couldn't coordinate to get back there and defend it, so just never finished that degree. Otherwise, I'd have a master's from Iowa State in International Development Studies. So I've done all the coursework, all the research, wrote the thesis. My thesis in 1995 that I started for that program was on the housing subsidy program that the African National Congress proposed for South Africa. What I was suggesting in 1995 is that the ANC's approach was wrong. Yeah, imagine that. I suggest they're wrong. Not in having a housing subsidy program, but rather in the approach that they were taking. In order to qualify for the housing subsidy program in South Africa when it first came about, you qualified based on your income level. So the people who could most benefit from it were people working in the mines or men who were geographic bachelors. They could get the money for the housing subsidy, but they didn't need the housing subsidy because they were living in flop houses and hostels and things like that, and they worked in the mines, and then every few months they would go back home to KwaZulu-Natal or to the Free State or Northern Cape, wherever they lived, go back from the mines, and they would go there. The housing subsidy was needed in the Free State, in the Northern Cape, in KZN, so that the women, almost always women, the women, the spouses or partners and their children could use the housing subsidy to build or repair an abode for them, not for the guys working in temporary housing, so they could bowl it on hookers and blow, which is what some of them did, or booze. Chibuku or Castle Log or whatever it was. But so my point with the subsidy was that the subsidy was going to be given to the wrong people. The subsidy should be based on need, not income. I thought based on income was idiotic. If you base it on need, you look at all South Africans, and then this would also alleviate the problem of, for instance, that wasn't my focus, but in retrospect, it would have alleviated the problem for poor white Afrikaners, of which there are hundreds of thousands of now. Those folks, rather than focus on people's skin pigmentation, if you focused on housing need. So if you're a woman and you have 4 children living with you, you need so much space in order to live properly. So that children can have proper beds, space the ages apart. I had a whole very complicated formula and coefficient working this out, and math is not my forte, but I had it all worked out so that you could say, take the mother of 4 living in KZN with a toddler, a 6-year-old, and 2 teens, and come up with a requirement for how much space they would need for living, and then toilet space and things like that, so that you have ablution that covers everyone, and cooking space and all those things. So this is what I came up with for the housing subsidy program, and that was my thesis back then. And I stand by the research I did back then. I said that the ANC simply had it wrong. Giving someone money based on income thresholds was the wrong approach. The need is more important. And I think that's still the case today. What you need for housing is different than what you make in income, usually, oftentimes. So anyway, that was my housing thesis on the international development studies. And I had 3 subject areas. I studied international political economy, I studied community and regional planning, and I studied anthropology, specifically cultural anthropology, which of course plays a role. And so that was my first master's program. As I said, I don't have the sheepskin because I never defended my thesis. But anyway, I did the work, so I take credit for doing the work because I did do it. Had good grades at it. So let's see what else here. Great to hear from Colonel Stuff. Having a chance to attend the college would be amazing. Yeah, the Army War College is pretty good. I'm biased. I taught there. It's not perfect, and a lot of people at the War College asked me, and they said, so they just assumed, like a lot of others, that I would be working there when I retired. And I looked at them and said, are you high? Are you smoking crack? Have you enjoyed the bureaucracy that's present here at the War College? All the things that make it difficult to want to work here? The work, working with the students, research, writing, doing things, engagements, international cooperation with partners, that's all fantastic. It's wonderful, truly fulfilling. I know a lot of senior officers in Africa because they came to the War College. And some of them actually I sent here. On my way here to War College, there were a couple of students that I'd sent here before I got here, and they were at the War College, so it's interesting. But that's all very rewarding. But the Army has a way of sucking the life out of people with its bureaucracy. And I had been fortunate to go to what we call joint tours. That's inter-service, so more than one service. I had 14 consecutive 14 years or 14, not 9 consecutive joint tours. That's what it was. 9 consecutive joint tours in which I was in an assignment that was an Army position, but not an Army-controlled environment. It was multi-service. So that included the Defense Language Institute, which is an Army institute, but it was a joint environment. Then I went to the embassy in Tunisia. Then I went to the National Security Agency, then Defense Intelligence Agency, then Liberia, and Botswana, and the list goes on, and AFRICOM eventually. So that I may have been working places the Army controlled as an installation like Stuttgart, but it was a multi-service environment. So my peers and colleagues and bosses were Navy, Air Force, Marines, civilians. So it's very different. And then I went back to my first Army installation since 1999 when I came to the War College. And while I dearly love the War College, and it's an amazing experience and great learning environment, I could do without the administrative trivia. It's very frustrating. Getting authorization to travel. So for instance, as a senior colonel in my military, in my Army, in Africa, when I wanted to travel, all I needed was authority from the general officer or the civilian of that equivalent in Germany to approve my travel from my budget. So they're just making sure that I wasn't abusing it. And that's fine. I don't mind checks and balances. But here at the War College, 9 people had to approve every time that I traveled. By the way, most of these trips were trips that they told me to go on. I didn't ask to go on them. So they tell me to go on the trip, and then I have to wait for 9 people to review it and approve it, then the budget to approve it. But it's insane. It's just absolutely insane. And so that's just a little thing that really drives some people nuts. And so I don't miss that at all. And now that I'm retired, I could grow this whether I'm working at War College or I'm sitting here doing this YouTube video. So that's not the issue. But yeah, it's I don't miss that. So that's one of the things that I do not miss about the War College. But a lot of people were actually surprised that I wasn't going to be teaching as a civilian there. But I didn't even apply for a position. I wasn't interested. I might be interested later on, but for the moment, it's just not something that appeals to me. Although I have gone back to the War College, I've been a guest lecturer on a couple of occasions already since I retired a few months ago, before the lockdown. And also I was a facilitator and a moderator at the African Alumni Symposium, which is when we bring War College graduates or all the service schools, but in this case, it was just War College this year, back to Carlisle, and we talk about strategic topics. Now, this is sponsored by U.S. Army Africa, based in Vicenza. It's paid for by Africa Command, which is their headquarters, and it is conducted here. It's a series of events at AFRICOM funds. One is supposed to be at the Naval War College, then the Air War College at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, and then the Army War College. But for some reason, the Air and the Navy haven't done it the last 2 years. So this one was the first one since we last hosted it 3 years prior. So I've actually gone to 3 of these. I was a guest speaker and panel member at the Naval War College when I came back from Ethiopia a few years ago. And so I did that one. I was by name request. And unfortunately, I was asked to come up for the week, but I was new here and we were teaching and they wouldn't let me go for the whole week. So I worked here, then drove to the airport in Harrisburg, flew to Rhode Island, and then drove over, got to bed around 11 o'clock at night, got up in the morning, went in and spent the day there as a panel member and a speaker. And then that night flew back so I could teach the next day. So I only missed one day, which was the Wednesday, because we weren't teaching class on Wednesday. Absolutely insane. So I did that with the Naval War College, and then I did the one here at the Army War College 3 years ago, and then this one this year. But 3 years ago, I was the Director of African Studies on active duty at the War College. This time, I was a guest moderator who came in. So it was a good experience. Anyway, let's see what else we got here. What's your current take on the South African Army, current and previously? Let's see. Michelle, yeah, okay. What's my take on the South African Army? So by South African Army, I'm going to assume you mean the South African military. I can talk about the Army, I can talk about the military, but the problem with the South African Army is that it's been neglected for over 2 decades by the ANC government. Now, some of you who are South Africans are going to laugh when I say that. No, it's true. The South African Army didn't get Gripen fighters or Hawk lead-in fighter trainers. It didn't get Type 209 diesel submarines. It didn't get cruisers from German shipbuilders. It didn't get a whole host of things. It has been neglected. Its prime movers, its trucks, its bakkies that it needs to transport things have been neglected for decades. Starbucks break. Additionally, the Army is hampered by the reality that most of the groups that were merged from the SADF and all of the other forces into the SANDF were infantry at best. They had no skills to do anything else. So if you remember, at the end of apartheid in the early 1990s, we merged the South African Defense Force, which was a world-class premier military, small but very effective, whipped the Cubans' backsides repeatedly in Angola. Very effective at what they did. Special ops, conventional warfare, unlimited resources, truly amazing, well-trained soldiers. Now, frankly, part of that's because the South African military is kind of brutal in its training of soldiers, but I'll let some SADF veterans comment on that if they like. But they were very effective, world-class. The SADF was merged with the MK, Mkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the ANC, the Pan-African Congress's armed wing, plus all of the Bantustan, so the Ciskei Defense Force, the Maputo Tswana Defense and Security Forces, Venda forces, all of them were merged. And overnight, the South African military went from about 60,000 to 180,000 soldiers, just like that. Well, obviously, they're not going to have a force of 180,000. South Africa can't afford that. So what happened was that they came up with separation packages and they did mandatory time for people who are overage and such. And over the course of about 5 years, got that down to what the eventual status was. And the plan with the South African military was to be around 60, 70,000. It's dipped down to the 50s, but back up to 60. So around 70, let's say 65,000. We'll pick that figure. That was the plan. And they got there eventually. But here's the thing. The force is overage, even to this day. You have people who came in, who were young men in 1994, say they were in the Ciskei Defense Force. They're 18 years old in 1994. They come in the Ciskei Defense Force. They're still in SANDF, and they're still in infantry. You had a lot of people who had very poor education, either because of the Bantu system or because of the fact that a lot of Black South Africans resisted apartheid by simply not going to school because they refused to be taught in Afrikaans when that was introduced in 76 and again in 85. So you have 2 generations of a lot of Black South Africans who don't have proper education, and many of those sort of folks from that generation are still in uniform in the SANDF. And so you can't have an army that's successful when your privates, their average age is 38. Now, I don't know what it is today. We've got some new blood from the military skills program to bring people in. But when I was the analyst covering South African military in the mid part of the aught decade, so about 15 years ago, the average age of the infantry soldier then was 38 years of age. That's insane. Infantry soldiers have to be young, agile, and adept. Your leaders can be older and experienced, but you can't have privates who are 43 years old trying to hump a 70-pound rucksack through the bush or carry a wounded comrade. They're not physically capable of it. They don't have the stamina and the constitution. So the South African Army has been neglected, and it's been forced to keep people that should not be on active duty. In our military, you get promoted or you get out. Harsh, but true. You can't be a 40-year-old private in the U.S. Army. You can't be a 40-year-old sergeant in the U.S. Army. You can't be a 40-year-old staff sergeant. You could be a 40-year-old sergeant first class because you're raising up the ranks and you've met certain gates. But there's a reason for that. And it's not just to exclude people. It's because you need a healthy force. And of course, to have experienced leaders, they're going to be older, and that's just the nature of the thing. But you can't have your entire force be 50 years old running around trying to carry rucksacks and drag people's bodies off the battlefield. So that's why you have that. So the South African military army specifically suffers from neglect. And here's another thing. The South African Army, the SAA, doesn't have enough money to do the exercises and training that it needs to do repeatedly. Oftentimes, the only training some units are getting is when they're deployed. And by the way, they don't deploy units historically. Since the end of apartheid, usually when the SANDF has sent a unit, especially after 2000, it's been an amalgam. And why is that? Because for the longest time, the South African military correctly followed the UN advice on not deploying HIV-positive people to combat zones and peacekeeping missions. And there's a reason for that. It's a health issue, and also it's an issue of soldiers will be soldiers, and you want to protect the people you're supposed to go protect, not potentially infect them with HIV because someone's having sex with locals. Let's be honest, that happens. Pretend it doesn't, but it does happen. But more importantly, soldiers are subjected to a great deal of stress and strain, and those things weaken your immune system and make you more vulnerable to opportunistic infections. And so people with HIV who fall into those conditions, poor sleep habits, poor eat habits, lots of stress, getting fired at, tension, your immune system wears down, HIV takes over, you get ill, you die, then they've got to evacuate your body, they've got to replace you, it's just a mess. So this is why for the longest time we've recommended not deploying HIV positive soldiers. But the UN rescinded that advice a few years back, which I think was boneheaded. Well, now we've got antiretrovirals. Yeah, well, you don't just like, it's not like a one-a-day vitamin. Oh, here's your antiretroviral. Take this with your Starbucks or your Steri Stumpy. Here you go. Hang on, let me take that pill. I'm all better. No, it doesn't work that way. People who are taking antiretrovirals need their nutrition monitored. They need their stress monitored. They need their lifestyle monitored. They need to pay attention to everything that happens in their life. They also need counseling and follow-up and testing. It's not simply, here's a pill, walk away. It doesn't work that way, folks. So anyway, so the South African Army, in my view, has been neglected, and its capacity, its readiness is suspect at best. There are parts of the South African Army that are still world-class, but that's decreasing as the years go by. And also the way that they're insistent on doing promotions based on race, which is not helpful. It doesn't help. You should promote people based on merit. And now that we've had 26 years of new people entering the military, oftentimes in much more balanced, many more black South Africans are entering the SANDF than whites or Indians or colors, then naturally it should work out. You should get the talented people rise up the rank. But if you just do it artificially based on quotas, which is what they've done, historically, that is a problem. I understand the reason, the logic for doing it early on. You can't have all white officers. It just doesn't work very well for cohesion and morale. Shouldn't matter, but it does. So anyway, but in this point, 26 years later, should not be an issue. You should just be, if you're a young white soldier, a young white South African, you want to enlist in the Army and become an infantryman, you should be able to become an infantryman. If you got leadership and talent, you should get promoted based on that, become a squad leader, and then a platoon sergeant, or become an officer. That should happen. But it's not quite happening that way for a lot of South Africans. So the SANDF as a whole suffers from a multitude of issues, and the biggest one is underfunding. South African military is funded abysmally, and so it cannot maintain operational readiness that needs to do, let alone do operations that the politicians constantly send it on. Now, having said all that, the South African military since apartheid has done some amazing things, in particular when it comes to peacekeeping. It's also had some embarrassing performances too, not the least of which was the Central African Republic a few years ago when a battalion was nearly wiped out by a group of rebels and turncoat soldiers and others in the Central African Republic. Or in Operation Boleas in Lesotho in the 1990s, twice the South Africans and the Botswana Defense Force deployed in Lesotho. And on the first occasion, soldiers new to the SANDF, who'd only been in it for a couple of years, dropped their rifles, turned and ran away when someone discharged a shotgun in a village. Very embarrassing. They were on a joint patrol with the Botswana Defense Force, which is a professional military, does train, and its soldiers are professional. The South Africans dropped their rifles and ran away, and the Botswana soldiers were standing there like, where are you guys going? Anyway, I'm embellishing the story slightly, but those who are familiar with the SANDF and Operation Boleas know what I'm talking about. It's not a fake story. It's just a little bit of embellishment for color. Anyway, so let's see what else we got over here. Michelle, okay. Does the U.S. still get a lot of men or women wanting to sign up in the military? Yeah, absolutely. SC, we sure do. I love that four-leaf clover, by the way. That's awesome. Yeah, the U.S. military does. Now, we do face challenges from time to time. Meeting, I say we, I'm not an active duty anymore, but I am on a retired role, so technically I'm still with the military. Just I get a retirement check, so and I only get that because I'm retired, which means they can call me back. But yeah, so I guess I can still say we. We have trouble meeting recruiting goals occasionally, and that's usually a function of a robust economy. So recently we had trouble. But the other reason is that you take an average cohort, say 100 men and women who are 18 years of age, come 18 years of age today, just 100. From that group, typically only 18 to 22 of them can even qualify for military service because of physical, mental disabilities, or ailments, or trouble with the law. Yeah, surprisingly, yeah, enough. Or academically, they can't meet the standards. It's not. We don't just take anybody. Now there are exceptions. We have waivers for lots of things to let people come in so that we don't just exclude people. But by and large, only 18 to 22% of people in a given cohort could even qualify to join. So if you take 100 young Americans, we're not competing for 100 young Americans. We're competing for those 18 to 22 who can even qualify to come in. And then, of course, some of them wash out because they're not up to it. Physically, they can't handle it. They can't handle stress. And so they get out during the training, and we lose a small number there. But the 18 to 22% we're competing against, we're also competing against Google and IBM, John Deere, Delta Airlines. Take your pick. We are competing in the open marketplace for these folks. And it can be difficult, but we have very little difficulty getting people to enlist because they have a sense of patriotism or they're trying to raise money for a university because we're very generous with that, the military. But we do face challenges from time to time. But typically, when the unemployment rate is below 5%, it becomes more challenging for the military to recruit simply because people have more lucrative opportunities for young men and women. When the unemployment rate was below 4%, which it was before COVID-19, Trump helped push it down below 5%. To 4% or less, which it was less than 4%, then we really have challenges. When unemployment is above 5%, 6, 7, we usually have no challenges. When I entered the Army in 1983, unemployment in the county I lived in Ohio was 26%. The Army had no trouble meeting recruiting goals. In fact, I had to wait 6 months to come on active duty because there was no slot for me to come in as a private because the Army was full. So it just depends on the economic circumstances. But Americans, by and large, tend to be patriotic. Even people on the left tend to be patriotic, and a lot of people want to serve. So let's see what else. Outside perspective. Agree, you're talking amongst yourselves. So Eddie says, your comment on military world games in Wuhan, November 2019, countries at high attendance. Yeah, Eddie, please tell me about these world games. You know, the Chinese claim that the American military did an exercise in Wuhan. I'm not aware of that. So I'm curious about that. Zirkstein. Hey, well, welcome there, Zirkstein. I don't recall seeing you before. What was the old wrecking army unit from South Africa? Oh, gosh, yeah. Don't recall the designation off the top of my head. You know, the South Africans did a lot of special forces things and reconnaissance. So they had guys trained to use the submarines, the Daphne class submarines that came from France, and they would land, put guys on a dinghy, and they would little rubber boat, and they'd go to shore and do operations and come back and get on the submarine and disappear, and people would never know they were ever there. Pretty amazing stuff. Michelle, thank you for my insight. It's her thoughts too. Yeah. No, the South African military. I mean, there's a lot of dedicated professional people in uniform who try, but listen, I could take 10 South African general officers. It doesn't matter if they're white, Indian, black. It doesn't matter. I could take 10 of them, line them up, and we could make beach floats out of them. The health and condition of the senior officers in the SANDF is atrocious. Overweight, a lot of HIV positive, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure. They're all walking billboards for how not to live one's life for a variety of reasons. And it's across the board. It's not just, I mean, you know, anyway, so they've got all kinds of challenges, not just the budgeting. They also got challenges in leadership. Nicholas says, just tuned in. Hope you're doing well. I am. Thank you very much. It's been a great day. Those who tuned in earlier for the Giselle concert, if you look on the screen, I still got that up there. It's a lockdown concert live stream. Giselle debuted her album today, and I was one of the streams that it was on. So she came over my YouTube channel. We had a good turnout of people tuning in to watch that. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go watch the stream afterwards. Some people weren't overly thrilled with the first 20 minutes or so, but let me tell you, the last 40 minutes of content were just knock them dead. I think the issue, the first part, is that some of the songs were similar melody, and it wasn't to everybody's liking. But once we got to about the 30 or the 20-minute mark in the concert, everything else after that was just amazing. It was a good mix. It really went really well. So please tune in and catch Giselle after this if you haven't done it. If you watched it, watch it again. You know, it's like having an hour-long music video. You just play in the background on your screen or on your computer or your TV if you like. But I had a live stream before that just to tune up and get people to come in and listen to what was going on and promote her show, just to make sure people were aware of it. So I did about a 45-minute live stream before that, and a lot of people tuned in for that. So some of you now were here then. Thank you for that. So that was good, and it worked. And then we did the Giselle concert. That was brilliant. I caught a bit of Ronaldo Ho's program, and then I was always going to come back and do this to kind of summarize the concert and talk about it and just kind of do a live stream. So yeah, it's been a really good day. I haven't got any exercise done, but it has been raining. It's nasty and overcast outside, not very appealing. I might still go get a little bit of walking in before the evening's over just to stay healthy. But yeah, so it's been a very good day. I've enjoyed it in the midst of the Wuhan coronavirus, or COVID-19, lockdown taking place here in central Pennsylvania. Yeah, so thank you very much for that, Nicholas. It's been quite a good day. All good this side. Had an afternoon nap, caught the last 10 minutes of Ronaldo, sorted out my notification issue with the phone. Oh, good for you, Nicholas. Excellent. Yes, you've had a good day too, despite the lockdown. Zerksten says South African Special Forces Brigade. Yeah, okay, but there was a couple specific recce units, I think, smaller units. Anyway, not important. Paulie says you're missing good military stuff this evening. Worth watching that. Okay. You guys are back and forth. Was the individual that? Okay. Lots of special forces. You guys are really into special forces. Do you know the answer? I don't think I know the answer. I'm lost on the questions now. Conditioning is disastrous of our defense force. Yeah, 43rd Battalion, Special Forces. Yeah, okay, there you go. I think that's right. Yeah, and then of course you had in Namibia, you had Kotfoot, the Crowbar unit, and the Buffalo Battalion. They're not really special forces. The other is Mark Gardner just came in and said Kotfoot. Yeah, that's the one. That was a police special task force in Namibia. That's correct. Yep. Angolans. Yep, absolutely right. They were lethal. Yes, they were lethal. So a couple good books written about that from people who were in the unit. I have them in my book collection, really talking about the Bush War in Namibia and Angola. Fascinating stuff if you're a military historian or you just have interest in events. It was an exciting time for those of us watching from afar, but of course those engaged in the Bush War, not the most pleasant of experiences. Very tough. The South Africans really, for a long time, fought this Bush War against the MPLA in Angola and against SWAPO and its guerrilla forces or terrorists or both, who were based in southern Angola. In fact, in the 1970s, the South African military nearly destroyed the MPLA, marching almost all the way to Luanda before they were pulled back, which had they not been pulled back, history would have changed dramatically for Southern Africa and certainly for Angola. And we would never have seen the likes of Dos Santos in power for so long. Anyway, that's counterfactual. Counterfactuals are always fascinating. What if Japan had won the Second World War? Well, life would be very different, ladies and gentlemen. What if Hitler hadn't been such an obsessive tool when it came to running military campaigns and simply allowed his generals to make the operational decisions and strategic decisions for the forces? They most likely would have concentrated their forces in the north and just left a token force to encircle Leningrad and take in 80% of the troops that were used there and move them to Moscow, and then Moscow would have fallen, and they would have continued east to the Urals that first winter, or next spring, not the first winter, and there'd be no Soviet Union, and Nazi Europe is what we would have had. So counterfactual is always lots of fun, always lots of fun. So I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but there's been a lot of interesting commentary from South Africans, particularly from Black South Africans, about the government and about what's been happening. So I pulled a few things up. This is from the Daily Maverick, from the UDM leader, Bantu Holomisa. He said that it will be a pity if politics of factionalism is allowed to show its ugly head in the middle of the war being the war against COVID-19. His comment triggered an immediate response from the Minister in the Presidency, Jackson Mthembu, who said, "Media reports are not true." President Cyril Ramaphosa felt the need to say in his weekly newsletter, which he put out, "It is wrong to suggest that there are ministers or a president doing and saying whatever they want on this matter." We're talking about tobacco sales. The decision to continue the ban on tobacco sales was a collective decision, and the public statements by both myself and the minister were done on behalf of and mandated by the collective I lead. Now, what he's talking about is the coronavirus, National Coronavirus Command Council, whatever this nebulous, nefarious body is. I think that really this comes down to an issue of the fact that a lot of people in South Africa are already seeing this to be the case. Is this the future of South Africa before the 2021 elections? So what am I doing? Well, I'm writing on my whiteboard. Why? Because this is what I want to show you. There you go. Is this what we have today? Is it President Cyril Ramaphosa or is it President Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma? What is the real deal in South Africa? NDZ. Is that the President of South Africa? That's what this is a reference to. President NDZ. Is that what we have in South Africa? Yeah, that's the reason. That's what prompted the commentary. And this is because she countermanded Ramaphosa's comments on level 4 about lifting the cigarette sales ban. Anyway, I found that fascinating. Bantu Halamisa had that to say. It just shows you that the ANC, he's a UDM member, so he's never been thrilled with the ANC, but it just shows that the ANC's thoughts that they have a lock on civil society might not be as strong as they think it is. Let's see. So nebulous, nefarious. Yeah, that was good. And I put those right back next to each other. Good. Yeah, I like that. Thank you, Michelle. Nicholas says, disbanded, he worked in Natal with them during weapon seizure operations, the Inkatha Freedom Party, ANC, unrest. Blokes were fit, up and down, bloody mountains, not a beat of sweat. Yeah, they were tough soldiers. Coatfoot was amazing. Yeah, and they were just tested as a consequence, and that's the reason they were disbanded. SWAPO did not want them around with, I guess, good reason in their case. Paulie says, I think the SEALs are divided in 3 training teams, 1 to 5 in one place, 6 to 10 another. Team 6, I have no idea. They're covert, the cream of the SEAL teams. I won't comment on the SEALs other than say that they do exist. No, Nicholas, I'm not going to fill you in on the SEALs. You know, we have all kinds of special forces in the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, the Marines. Of course, we have Delta Force in the U.S., which you're probably familiar with, or in the U.S. Army, I should say, which you're probably familiar with. Now, here's another one, guys. This one I think is interesting. This is from Selo Ladiga. Selo Ladiga is a social commentator and author and the CEO of the Patriotic Movement. Now, in my stream earlier today, I promised I would address this. The Patriotic Movement is a civil society organization that promotes patriotism in South Africa. Well, I'm all for that. I truly think patriotism is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with nationalism. So these are some of the comments. Let me read through these and get you guys' feelings on this. So Ladiga says that only a truly crazy and suicidal ruling party would cancel a 350 Rand grant to 10 million unemployed voters a few months before elections in a democratic country. What he's referring to is the discussion that now that grants are in place for people who can't work, unemployed, that it seems highly unlikely that in the run-up to elections coming up in 2021 or 2023, that the ANC will remove these grants. So what he's saying is it seems like they're going to be here for the long term. The announcement by President Cyril Ramaphosa that all unemployed South Africans will receive a 350 Rand basic income grant to mitigate the vicious effects of COVID-19 was historic indeed. Now every South African who is not in a job receives a grant from the government. He thinks that's good. I don't know that I agree with that, but I see his point there. The implication is that a few taxpayers in this country are now responsible for the well-being of the unemployed, the old, the handicapped, the pregnant, legal and undocumented migrants, the abandoned, and so forth. I do not know of any country with such a comprehensive grant system in Africa or anywhere else in the world. Yes, we are an emphatic nation, or empathetic nation, not emphatic, yeah, or we're an empathetic. We're an empathetic nation. So that's really what he's saying here. So now he goes on, he says, just imagine if indeed in November 2020, their newly acquired wealth was taken away from them by a pro-poor people's movement, the African National Congress, that led them in the liberation struggle and restored their dignity. This will be a monumental betrayal, and their anger will be felt all over municipalities in the country as their loyalty shifts from the ANC to the EFF. Not so sure I agree with that. Some will. This will be manna from heaven for Julius Malema, the self-styled commander-in-chief of the Red Forces. Yeah, he's red, all right. So Ramaphosa and his party are not stupid. The Rand 350 will be made permanent. Only an idiotic party would not do that. So brace yourselves for political somersaults when the 6-month period approaches its end. This is politics. Absolutely correct. And anyone that thinks that the 350 Rand grant is going away, even though it's almost nothing in terms of cash, I agree with Ladiga. He's right. It's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be permanent. And of course, the South African government doesn't have the money to pay for this. So what are they going to do? Borrow more money? Are they going to take taxes from yet more South Africans? We shall see. Anyway, Now, what he says in addition to this, Starbucks break, uh, he says, I have no problem with the government making permanent the basic income grant when it ends. I do. Sorry, we differ on this position. What surprised me is that why Mr. Tumamina failed to see this Tumamina moment. The 350 Rand was a perfect moment to galvanize 10 million soldiers to advance this agenda. He should have attached community service to the grant so that the recipients could provide some useful service to the nation. Just this week, he was complaining about how dirty South Africa is during his visit to KwaZulu-Natal. Here's a free way to clean up the country for 350 Rand, and the commander-in-chief couldn't see it and was probably thinking about how much it could cost him to make South Africa clean. In the spirit of Tumamina, this was going to be easy to sell to the excited new recipients of the grant. No, it's not. No, it's not. You offer people a grant and then you tell them they have to work for it. They're not going to buy it. It doesn't work that way. If you offer people a job that gets a grant payment as a consequence of doing something, then you empower people to work and you also help people who are less fortunate. But this is very much like what the United States did in the 1930s and set us on the path of state dependency. And decades later, we still have people who are on welfare in this country after 3 and 4 generations of families. Anyway, so now this I do agree with. He says this. So he says the ANC has long created a culture of dependence among the people. From the time before the first democratic elections in 1994, the party promised a better life for all to its supporters and voters. Both of those are true statements. Since then, it has introduced one grant after another to ensure that the masses return into power in every election. I agree again. A self-destructive dependency syndrome has long permeated South African society. Well, we are really much in agreement here. Citizens have been made to believe that government will provide everything for them. Free education, free healthcare, free food parcels, free meals at school, free scholar transport, free official funerals, and the list goes on and on and on. That's right. And who pays for that? That's corrosive. That is absolutely corrosive. I do not believe in that concept. So Ladiga and I have much in common on this, but the one thing we disagree on is I don't think the utility of the grant. Also, his idea that getting people to work after you've given the money is going to work. No, you got to get them to work, then pay them. That's just how now things work. So I thought that was interesting. This is some of the discourse taking place in South African media. That was an op-ed. Another one that we saw out there from the Black South Africans. So calling things as he sees it about the ANC. And I largely agree with what he had to say. So let's see what else. Red forces equal red ants, or new special forces. Christoph says, I agree that most walking away from the ANC will walk towards EF. I'm not so sure I agree with that, Christoph. We'll see. We'll see if that happens. I like to think that at least a third of the people who vote for the ANC are rational, free-thinking people who will make rational decisions when they grow tired of the ANC. I may be optimistic there, but you of course always have people who vote identity, and they're not going to change no matter what. And you will have some who shift to the EF. But I think the EFF has by and large picked up the chunk that it could pick up and hived it off of the ANC. It could grow more, but the EFF has offered nothing during COVID-19. They're virtually unheard of. They have nothing to say, even the buffoonish commentary from Julius Malema. And more importantly, the EFF has lost its biggest platform. How do people see the EFF? Each and every day, people see the EFF watching television of Parliament when they act like jackasses wearing their prison red jumpsuits, interrupting everybody, and we constantly hearing, well, the honorable gentleman. Well, you're not honorable when you behave the way that Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu and all these other buffoons from the EFF behave in Parliament. But that's how they get so much of their attention. And then, of course, they get it with Twitter. Well, they get it with Twitter because they're running around, running their mouth off, Malema saying racist and inflammatory things that should have landed him in jail by this stage. And they get all that press coverage. Well, they can't run around and do that now, and they're not in Parliament because Parliament's not in session. So those two platforms are removed. So yes, the EFF can collect more people from the ANC's failures, but I think that others are better suited to pick up that support. The DA, if it has its act together, will pick up some of that support. We'll see. I mean, this is all speculation. Who actually has the truth? None of us do, because events can change. If you go to the end of the bizarre and unwarranted impeachment of Donald Trump that took place after the impeachment was over, Trump was swimming with he had a tailwind in his back. He's clearly going to just roll through this election no matter who they put in front of him. And here we are now, and there's polls in the United States saying that Joe Biden is actually leading by like 10 points. I do question the reality of those polls, but Joe Biden, really? Joe Biden, this would be the Joe Biden who, when Hillary Clinton came on his live stream, fell asleep as she endorsed him. That is the best they can come up with an opponent. I still think that Trump will win hands down. We'll see. I could be wrong. I could be right. It's 50-50, I guess, but we will see. But we'll see what happens with the EFF too. I think the 2021 elections, should they happen, and they ought to happen, otherwise there'd be riots. But when the 2021 municipal elections happen, if the DA can win a majority in Joburg, Pretoria, and Nelson Mandela Bay, which are not out of reach in any of those localities, and they can govern without a coalition, we will see a sea change in views towards the ANC as service delivery improves in those locations, assuming the DA can provide sufficient numbers of qualified, talented, honest, and reputable members of their party to serve. And I think they can. We'll see. Let's see, what else? The disgruntled are not the level-headed people. Well, yeah, that's true, but I think that most of the ones who are really, really angry, Christoph, have already gone to the EFF. But could be wrong. I think the highest EFF is ever going to get, unless something bizarre happens in that country, is about 18 to 20%. Unemployment, poverty will drive the next election. Yeah, they will, and it's all caused by the ANC. Well, not all, but I mean, some of this would have happened anyway because of the global slowdown. But much of this pain is being forced by the ANC's draconian lockdown measures, which make very little sense, and their arguments don't hold water at all. You have the Green Berets, we have the Red Berets. Yeah, our special needs force. Nicholas, I love that. So the EFF, the Red Berets are your special needs forces. Gotta love it. That's a great line. I think EFF is just a different faction of the ANC. Well, COPE is just a different faction of the ANC, an egomaniacal group of people whose feelings were hurt when Thabo Mbeki was bounced on his ear. And well, I didn't like Thabo Mbeki for a lot of reasons, but my feelings were hurt too, because the African National Congress bounced the leader of its party, and then he was compelled to resign as president of the country. So what comes first in South Africa, the party or the country? Well, clearly with the ANC, it's the party, and party loyalty comes ahead of serving the nation. And that's borne out in so many ways. And the bouncing of Thabo Mbeki is evidence of that. So yeah, absolutely. But COPE is simply a different faction of the ANC. Terra Lakota and others whose feelings were hurt that Thabo Mbeki was bounced left, and they took 8%, 8.5% of the electorate, 7.5%, like 8% of the electorate in that first election of the electorate. Significant chunk, but they thought they were going to get 25 or 30%, and they were smoking crack because that wasn't going to happen. And so they've just kind of fizzled away into almost nothing. And by the way, they stole the name too. It wasn't original. The Congress of the People was not this current party, but rather the term for the umbrella group of people back in the 1950s who came together and did the Freedom Charter, which included the ANC. But they didn't write the Freedom Charter. They were part of it, despite the ANC's history. So let's see what else. Ultimately, Juju goes home to the ANC. I don't know if the ANC will take him back, Paulie, but I mean, Pennsylvania, 53,370 total cases, 3,712 deaths. But if you look under York County, ADA2, you'll see that I think 13 is the fatalities in this county, 450,000 people. Pennsylvania has 12.8 million people. So we have 57,000 cases. Michelle says the more they split the parties, the more the need for coalition in a ruling party. Coalitions are not that strong unless there will be continued instability. Well, the problem with coalitions, Michelle, is you have to have legitimate coalition partners. So if we look at the case of Nelson Mandela Bay, for instance, the EFF and the other parties who were willing to, was it the African Christian Party, whatever it was, anyway, these other parties were willing to ally with the DA in Nelson Mandela Bay, which allowed Athol Trollip to become the mayor, didn't care about governance. They cared about stealing and pilfering, and it's our turn to eat. That's what that was all about. And then Nelson Mandela Bay just became a platform for Julius Malema to spew his despicable racism, famously saying that with Athol Trollip, we need to cut the throat of whiteness. How is that not an offense? Anyway, it's not satire. He meant it. And so they did cut the throat of whiteness by unseating Athol Trollip as the mayor. And for the time he was in office, the entire time that the Democratic Alliance controlled the party and lost the coalition, but gained a couple of other votes so they could maintain it, that entire period that he was mayor was a period marked by incessant efforts to undermine him. Very similar to the situation Donald Trump has faced with basically, betrayal of the nation in order to unseat someone that you don't like. Same thing in Nelson Mandela Bay. Betrayal of citizens and residents in Nelson Mandela Bay simply to unseat Athol Trollip and the DA. And the sad part is that the Trollip and the DA did some amazing things with the limited resources and with all the distractions in a short period of time they were in power. So the problem with coalitions is you have to have a partner that wants to be a coalition partner that wants to govern. Of course, they've got to get something for it. If you're going to have a coalition, if you can't get a majority to form a national party or a national government and you go into a coalition, you're going to have to give the deputy president to someone. You're going to have to give a few ministerial positions to others so that you have, a coalition government, not simply one party. And that's understandable. But when you have people that simply want to control a city government so they can steal all the tenders and put money in their pockets, which is what the other folks want to do, and the reason why the DA took a plurality in the first place. In the 2016 elections, municipal elections, the DA got 45% of the vote in Nelson Mandela Bay. If they want to govern and if people want Nelson Mandela Bay to improve after 2021, the DA will need to get 51% of the vote. Ronaldo says 50.1, but now 51%. That way you don't have to worry about losing one member, one councillor. Anyway, point is that they need to take a majority and then show the difference to South Africans, and that's the one hope that the South Africans have. Now, the DA, I'm not supporting the DA. I'm not advocating the DA, and I have issues with the DA. Not the least of which is like the Republicans in America, when they get in power, they don't always govern the way they say they're going to govern. But there are a few hopes for the country other than the DA at this point when it comes to politics. But they've got to prove that they can do it. Let's see what else. As Ronaldo showed in his last stream, both the president and deputy's Twitter accounts show that they are president and deputy the ANC first. And then, yeah, exactly right, Christoph. And that's, I've said that all along. I've said that since this style of government was negotiated, and this is what came out with, and the Constitution was written in '96 and came into effect in '97. The system is set up so that the party is more important, and it's not simply the ANC. It's just the way the system is set up. You in South Africa don't vote for your president. That's insane, in my view. Now, in Germany, you don't vote for the chancellor. In the UK, you don't vote for the prime minister. I get that. The prime minister is the prime minister amongst the minister, but he's selected by the parliament. You don't vote for him. You vote, but you do vote for a candidate in the UK. You vote for one person versus another from different parties. Same in Germany. But in South Africa, you don't vote for a candidate. You vote for a party list. You go in, the ballot says ANC, UDM, EFF, DA. You pick one of those. And placement on the ballot actually matters. If you're down here, odds of you getting selected by someone, particularly an illiterate person or a poorly illiterate person, is not that strong. So voting for a party means the party is more important. And then based on a percentage of the vote, you get proportional representation in the parliament and at the provincial level as well. And that therein lies a problem. In the United States, and originally under our Constitution, we voted for members of Congress directly, who represent us based on congressional districts. We voted for them. We did not vote for senators, which is the higher legislative body. We have the House and Senate. Of the two, the senior body is the Senate, smaller, 100 senators, 2 for each state. And then the rest of the representatives, there's many more, there's 435 in the House. And that's broken down based on population and congressional districts, which are the same size by numbers. But in states, because states had primacy, not citizens, you get 2 senators, and every state has 2 senators. We did not vote for them. Under the Constitution originally, they were selected by the state legislatures. So the senators in the early part of our history were not, the first 100 years were not selected by citizens. I didn't get to vote for a senator. I voted for my congressman, and that was it. I can vote for the president, that's true, yes. But ultimately, the president is decided by the voters, but the voters, their votes are allocated based on the Electoral College, which is a system that's unique, and it has its merits, it has its drawbacks, but in my view, it's much better than the alternative. Anyway, so yeah, if you voted for the president in South Africa, it would be a very different situation. But what you have in South Africa now is you have a situation in which the ANC wins control of the Western Cape. They get 50% or 51% of the legislature, or the provincial legislature, and they win the vote. So what do? They deploy their cadres. So they send people from other parts of the country who are loyal to the ANC, who are not even from that area oftentimes. They deploy them into the Western Cape. And this is what happened when they took over a few years back, briefly. They come in the Western Cape. They don't have cultural, linguistic, familial, area knowledge, many of these people, with the region they're in now. And they're there to rule. But they're not ruling for the people. They're ruling for the ANC. And if it was the DA, it would be the same thing, and one would expect in many cases. Point is that the party takes precedence, and absolutely right. If you look at their Twitter accounts, their government position comes second. The African National Congress, in their view, is more important than the country of South Africa, and that's reprehensible in my book. Now, lots of political parties think they're more important than citizens around the world, but it couldn't be any clearer than the situation you have in South Africa, and I just find that it's unappealing, and that's not democracy in my mind. That's my view. Some people disagree with me, but that's my view, and I get paid the same whether I have that view or not, which is nothing. So let's see what else I got here. My new name. Okay. It's 25 minutes. What's that? I missed a few things here. I think it will hurt I think it hurt the DA when they joined force with the EFF. Yes, Michelle, they did. It did hurt them, but they didn't have very much option because they didn't win the majority. They would not have been able to form a government. Then the ANC would have formed a government. And then you would have a situation in Nelson Mandela Bay, much like Joburg, where the party with the plurality is sitting on the bench. So in Nelson Mandela, we have 45% of the vote. If the ANC had been able to cobble together a coalition of parties, which at the time they couldn't have got the EFF because the EFF hated them at the time. It still hates them, but is willing to team up with them now. But if they'd been able to put a coalition together, then the DA with a plurality and almost half the vote would have been sitting on the sidelines. You had that situation in Johannesburg where the ANC with a plurality of the vote didn't rule because the DA cleverly brought together a coalition and took over until Herman Mashaba, in his selfish, boneheaded, egotistical way, left the DA, making all kinds of outlandish claims about racism and discrimination, which were just BS in my view. Of course, I'm not Herman Mashaba. I didn't deal with what he dealt with on a daily basis, but publicly it doesn't have any appearance of that whatsoever. He left the party and made all these claims. And of course, when it came time to vote on a new mayor, the DA didn't have enough votes in the coalition to bring another candidate forward because Mashaba was the candidate that the other coalition partners were willing to accept. The candidate that they brought, they weren't accepting. And so the ANC was able to coalesce with other parties and take over Johannesburg. And what do we have now? We have the Johannesburg government sending out the red ants to evict people from informal settlements on government land, not even private residences, government land in the southwest part of Johannesburg, beating people up, arresting people, the police there teaming up with them. And who runs Johannesburg now? The African National Congress, the Congress the party that cares so much about Africans, especially about Black Africans, but cares so much about them that in the midst of COVID-19, at a time you're not allowed to leave your abode, they will evict you from your abode. They will tear down your informal settlement on land that is not in use. Now, those people are there wrongly, illegitimately, but that doesn't change the situation that the ANC government in Johannesburg with the ANC Metropolitan Police, Johannesburg Metropolitan Police, went out and evicted people, over 1,000 people from homes, including infants and toddlers, and left them on the high veld as winter approaches with no homes. Yeah, there's your ANC, ladies and gentlemen. How about the news media spend some time focusing on that? Yes, there was coverage of it, but no serious, legitimate discussion about the legitimacy of a government doing this or going after ANC local government or comparing and contrasting the DA Mashaba-led government in Johannesburg. Not that I'm saying it was great, but comparing and contrasting what they did with what the ANC was doing now that they're back in power. The ANC's actions are just beggar the imagination at times. You think that they're doing everything they possibly could to ensure defeat in the 2021 elections. I'm not predicting that they will lose, although I think they will lose a lot of the municipalities, but we shall see. Okay, what else did I miss here? The NMB, Nelson Mandela budget given to us by the government finance was $1 billion, of which they spent half. So within a year, the mayor wasted half. Yeah, Nicholas, there's all kinds of problems with the way the government's organized in South Africa. In fact, that the provincial and the municipal authorities are so dependent on the national government for the resources rather than be able to raise revenue on their own. And that in itself creates all sorts of problems when it comes to governance. So yeah, absolutely, that's a problem. And that's one reason why the ANC always holds the upper hand. So the DA runs the Western Cape and the DA runs Cape Town. But in many respects, when it comes to policing, for instance, their hands are tied. It's funny that the ANC was complaining about the level of insecurity in the Cape Flats when they know full well that they withheld resources from SAPS, the South African Police Services, to effectively go into the Cape Flats and do what needed to be done from a policing standpoint. I'm not talking about knocking heads, I'm talking about community policing. And they intentionally withheld those resources and then blamed the DA for the high crime rate in the Cape Flats. Yeah, this is a problem when funds are allocated the way they are. The ANC holds all the trump cards. But that's not going to change. So those who win from opposition parties, whether it's in KZN or in the Western Cape or wherever, if you're able to gain a foothold and get local and municipal or provincial government, you have to find a way to make it work. And maybe you need to turn to the private sector and get their help on some things and cooperate with the private sector. Give them breaks. Give them abeyances to allow them to do certain things if they cooperate and provide services for the government and for the community. Just a thought. You have to think creatively. The DA does think creatively sometimes, but they step on their own feet sometimes. Political parties do that. Exactly. Ballot papers are set up as if designed by psyops. Yeah, Nicholas, exactly right. You're voting for a party? No, that's not democracy. You're picking a party. You're not supposed to pick a party. You're supposed to pick someone to represent your interests. That's what a republic is. South Africa, in my view, and I've said this since '94, needs a federal system. It will work much better for South Africa. But this is a system that all parties, including the National Party, agreed to. because all of them saw benefit for themselves under the system, and that's why they came up with it. Search then says, if you like satire comedy, you should search YouTube for ZA News TV. They made puppets ANC and EFF members. Oh, yeah. That's kind of like they used to do in Germany and France and the UK, where they take the politicians and yeah. I'll have to check that out. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Even if they stop producing, there should still be some videos out there. That's I would like to be able to buy a box set of the little puppet figures of all the political leaders in South Africa, so I can have a puppet show with them. Put them on my shelf behind me. Anyway, I think I saw on Germ Warfare where Jeremy's got a little Zulu, or not Zulu, little Jacob Zuma doll back there. I didn't even know they made those. After I mentioned that on the live stream, I was watching Germ Warfare and I saw it. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I want one of those. I have a set of the Big Bang Theory characters, little bobbleheads, like all of the characters. It's pretty cool. Anyway, I used to keep that in my office. But speaking of my office, I'll move the Giselle thing off here and I'll move that photo back. This is a picture of my office at the War College, and one of the walls, what it looked like before. Whoops, hang on. Okay, not cooperating here. There we go. So that's one of my walls in the Army War College, and what it looked like before. I go too big there, I'll still be seen. What the wall looked like. And so you can see some South Africa things up there, but also Niger, the Pentagon, many other things. Malawi, Uganda, Ghana. What else is up there? Quite a bit. So that's one of the walls of my office. I kept all those things up on my wall. So if anyone's curious, I have pictures of the whole thing. This is from July of last year. Before I vacated my office, I took pictures of everything because there's a lot of effort went into making that wall and hanging all those things up. Let's see. Behavior in those institutions where they're mainly compromised to follow orders and benefit from that with no regard to us people. Yeah, well, my new name. Yeah, I agree with you. Nicholas says, add to your comment reference the red ants. They did this bulldozing in the face of their own level 4 or 5 rules. Yeah, exactly, Nicholas. I mean, so the rule was from the government, and Ronnie Lamola, the Justice Minister. Sorry, did I say Injustice Minister? I think I said Injustice Minister. Ronnie Lamola made it clear when the lockdown started that people could not be evicted, even if there was a court order to evict people from land that they were squatting on. Yet they did it. Where's the outrage? Where is Human Rights Watch? Where is the United Nations? Where is Refugees United? Where are all these people who supposedly care about people being mistreated? In this case of COVID-19 and the pandemic, destroying informal settlements. No, it's not right. They shouldn't be there. But you deal with that after this. And you deal with it in a different fashion. Arresting people, beating people, stealing money and cell phones, mobile phones out of people's pockets, which is what happened. The Red Ants do that. Yeah, the Red Ants, only a company like the Red Ants, a majority-owned business, could get away with abusing black South Africans in the fashion they do, and no one even bats an eye. No one blinks. My gosh, could you imagine if we had a minority-owned white security firm with only almost entirely white staff that was given the contract to go out and make people relocate from informal housing? Could you imagine that? Oh my God, there'd be riots in the streets and nothing but calls of racism. But there's no calls of racism about this, because whether it's whites or blacks doing it, it's not racism. It's just heartless nonsense is what it is. Anyway, yikes, the Red Ants. Ugh, gosh. Variable Vision says, please share any feedback, info, evidence regarding convictions in Johannesburg with Voldemort Pelzer. Yeah, I don't know Voldemort Pelzer, Variable Vision. So he's at the Report newspaper. Yeah, I've seen a couple videos he did, but I don't have a contact for him. So if anyone's got that, it could share it with me, an email address, or just give me the website to go to. You're talking about Report of the newspaper, right? Which is the Afrikaans newspaper. I think that's what you're talking about. I don't read the Afrikaans newspapers religiously because I have to concentrate. Afrikaans is not quite at the level it should be. But if you're talking about that, then I will take a look at it. Yeah, I'm familiar with who Voldemort Pelzer is, and I've seen him. I saw him do his interview of of Lana Marks and Lana Marks, Banana Marks. Yeah. Anyway, so Edu's taking care. Okay, he's taking off. Thanks for joining us, Edu. I think you popped in for the Giselle concert too. Thank you for popping in for that too. Really, it was really good stuff. Let me go back to where we're at. So Zerk says, last show I can find was over a year ago. Okay. Still can't believe it is used to plan TVs. No, I'm lost our sense of humor. Yeah, South Africans have an amazing sense of humor. I got to give you guys that. Americans can have a great sense of humor. We have some amazing comedians, but South Africans, of all stripes, have a tremendous biting wit, and they can just eviscerate you, and your entrails will be falling out. And you don't even know it. Not just that, but just the way that they look at life is really entertaining in English and in Afrikaans. So, and I'm sure in Zulu and Xhosa, which I don't speak, but I'm sure it's just as funny for those folks. But yeah, South Africans really, really, really have an interesting take on things. So, yeah, 5 o'clock. It must be about midnight for you guys there. Yeah, banana marks. Please don't ruin my evening. Yeah, what happened with Lana Marks? Well, not much. I think the Trump's got bigger fish to fry and other things to worry about than Lana Marks. Although, when Trump's reelected, assuming he's reelected in the fall, I would expect that we'll probably see Lana Marks move on and do something else, and probably someone else be appointed the ambassador to South Africa from the United States. Um, I'm just saying this right now. I'm available. uh, I'd be happy to serve in Pretoria as an ambassador. That's a political appointment, by the way. So there you go. And it just needs congressional approval. Anyway, so yeah, back to this. Yeah, you're right. Zirksten says we find humor in anything. You do, and these days you actually kind of have to find it in South Africa, don't you? I mean, and not just in South Africa, but around the world. This is truly bizarre, the conduct of our governments and the behavior and the excuses they use. I made a comment and I posted online. And someone I know who's a military officer who was a student and then a faculty member here from another allied country, whom I got along with pretty well, but he's a dyed-in-the-heart leftist and he just can't find any objectivity. And so if you say something that doesn't agree with where he's at, and I said plenty of things that did agree with where he's at, even some points that are what my views that were sort of left on a few things, he's fine. But the moment you say